Hey, this is a follow-up to my original demo on creating a dashboard and an associated map using that First Nations data. I had a question about the mechanics of doing the dashboard because I did kind of skip through that pretty quickly. So I thought as a follow-up, I'll walk through the steps specifically around the dashboard in a little bit more detail so you can see how it gets done. It is very simple. That's one thing people will find out, that it is, once you've got at least Excel 2010, that's obviously a mandatory requirement, you'll find that it's actually pretty easy. Now I'm working at home, so I'm on my Excel 2013 dashboard, but everything that I display will be something you could do in Excel 2010. The toolbar might look slightly different, but we're only going to be using a couple of tools, and those are more or less the same, so I'm sure you can figure it out. So here's your list of ingredients and instructions, and more often than not, what causes failure is number one, the lack of raw data. Most people create reports in Excel, they don't create data. By that I mean they take some information, they put some titles in it, they merge columns, put a few blank rows in because that makes it easier to read. If any of those are present, and in even one cell, then you can't do this. You need data. And one of the biggest learning challenges you'll face is getting people to understand there's a difference between data and outputs. People who are in databases understand that, but people who use Excel create the reports first and then add the data, in which case Excel can't help you. And so when I say raw data, this is what I'm talking about. It should look absolutely untainted, untouched, just rows and columns, clean. In other words, as if the column is about a date, it should have date fields in it, not summer or approximately. If it's about numbers, yes, it's numbers. If it's text. If you're getting data from good sources, then this problem doesn't exist. You just take it and use it, and you're fine. A lot of data you're going to get is going to be a mess, and creating a dashboard from that can be time-consuming. Now, the very first thing you should do, and this is almost this is something you should do all the time, which is make sure you're working in a table and not a spreadsheet. When you start an Excel file, it starts as a spreadsheet. 99.9% of the time, I'd swear, people actually are creating tables. So make sure you tell Excel it is a table. There's all kinds of good reasons for that I won't go into, but it's very simple. You just go onto the Home tab. Make sure you're in the table, of course. Home. There's this thing, dead center. That's why it's there, because it's so important. Format as table. Now you get to choose, what you want, and you can change it around or colors. But by making it a table, Excel will then work with this as a single unit and not just rows and columns. You save yourself all kinds of grief. So pick one you like and proceed. And you can see immediately one of the advantages of making it a table is when I scroll down, the headers automatically stay locked at the top. Again, you can do it manually, but if Excel knows it's a table, it understands what it has to do. It also understands if you do any calculations in the table that logically it will apply in other places. It prevents a lot of errors. So next step, we've got our table. So we're going to create a pivot table. And because, as you can see already, because you've already defined this as a table, it doesn't need to know, what cell range you want. It just says, take the whole table. Okay, we're going to take the table, move it into a pivot table. All of the dashboards and slicers simply operate from a pivot table, so it's a mandatory. In some cases, I actually create the pivot table, create the dashboard, and then actually hide the table because I don't really need the information. I just wanted the slicers. But you always have to start with a pivot table. So this isn't a pivot table training course, and there's plenty of stuff on that if you do want it. But at the very least, you've got to put some kind of table in place. In this case, I'll just do the bare minimum. So I've got, and of course you can always view the formula. If you want to change the names of those titles, that's fine. For now, I'm not going to worry about it. This is just a necessary evil, if you want to call it that. So now that we've got our data, created the table, created the pivot table, now all we have to do is select the slicers. So make sure your mouse is inside one of the cells in the table. If you try to insert slicers when you're outside the table, of course, it doesn't know where to go, and you'll get this weird looking message, and I get this all the time. So yes, it must be inside it. So insert, So insert, and then just mosey on over here to the slicer column. Now, this is the heart of a dashboard. These are simply a list of everything that's in your table, all the columns. You then decide which ones do you want to have on your screen here. This is like your palette. You're an artist now. Which buttons, slicers, whatever you want to call them, do you want to have available so that you can pick and choose from the data? Obviously, if you tried to put them all on the screen, it would be crazy. Some of them wouldn't make any sense. So here's where you have to give a little bit of thought to your users. Why are you creating this dashboard? If you really need all of these up there, then you probably want to make 2 or 3 dashboards. And if you're going to do these over the net on tablets, then you really have to be thoughtful about how much stuff you can jam onto a small screen. But again, that's just aesthetics and optics. For those of you that watched the first clip, this is the layout I chose. And again, it's just simply arbitrary. Oh, it also includes, I notice, a couple of things that are available in 2013. But obviously, the rest of the stuff on the screen is 2010. So if you take this as a model and go back to your worksheet, the challenge is simply to put those things on the screen that we need to match if you wanted to absolutely mirror the stuff that was up there. So all I'm doing here is just picking things up and just to get a start. So all of these boxes are now basically free floating, and you just kind of move them around the screen until you're satisfied with the layout. One of the things to do when you're in Excel is keep an eye on the toolbar when you are working. For example, if you click on the table, you will suddenly see all these other options available to you. Pivot table, analyze, and design. If you click on a slicer, you will see an option bar appear. Again, it gives you all kinds of options. This is a very common one. For example, it allows you to decide, well, in this case, I think I want to make the box, more horizontal or vertical. This allows you to say, well, I want 2 columns. Again, you can adjust heights and widths and so on. Again, that's more or less an optical issue. Again, remember that if you squeeze them too tight, people can't read them. You'll also see here over on the left, there are some pre-formatted options to say, like, you don't necessarily have to have them all the same color as you saw. Some of the choices from Microsoft tend to be rather funky, but you can choose between them. Group things as similar things with colors. I mean, part of this making a dashboard is making it pleasing to look at. So I'm going to carry on and just keep, question is trying to just make the best use of the real estate and deciding how best to show it. Obviously, this doesn't work if I squish it because I can't read the actual names. I do want to be able to read the names. But since the list is so long, that's fine. Some cases you can actually get all of them on this one box and see them. In other cases, not. But as you can see, all the slicers that you put on the screen, they're all interlinked. So when you pick one, a selection in one box is going to reflect in the other. And that's the beauty of the dashboard, is it basically gives you an answer to a question and answers all the criteria that you've chosen to display. And naturally, you can do multiple picks. If I pick Aboriginal skills, there's obviously that exists in many locations, but I could narrow it down to Campbell River, and there's only one there. In Duncan, there's 1. Kamloops, there's 3. There are a number of ways you can modify your slicer images. As I said, there's this one. I've got a separate YouTube on how to do personal modifications because every slicer has all of these components, which is quite a bit when you think about it. And because it can do the interactions that occur, what do you want to have happen when the button is pushed, what kind of font do you want, what color, what shape, what outline. It can get really quite time consuming to go through this if you want to customize them, every cell, every option within those slicers. There is another way you can modify slicers in general on your page layout themes. There's lots of different canned options here. I've actually find most of them aren't actually that good, but it allows you to make some real major adjustments. If you chose this one, which is really crazy, and then you'll notice that under your slicer options have now also changed to the point where these will now adapt differently. But again, that's personal choice. It's very interesting to look at, but I don't think I would want to use this one. So like all these tools, you don't want to get too colorful or creative because then they just become annoying and distracting. However, when you're finalizing a dashboard, and I'm not going to carry this one right through to completion because I think it's self-evident now what you need to do. You need to use the options that are available for slicers, change the shapes, locations on the screens, and how best to lay them out. There are a couple of things you'll want to do, though, when you finalize your dashboard. A dashboard should not look like an Excel sheet. It should not have rows and grids and numbers. In fact, anyone who shows me a dashboard that has those, I mean, that's a sign of someone who really hasn't, taken the time to understand what a dashboard does. So make that disappear. First of all, always have a blank column. Dashboard should never be jammed up into top left corner. And then switch all this stuff off. Switch headings off, formulas off, grid lines off. You can obviously put a title in there, and now you have what I would call closer to what a dashboard should be. I don't think I have time to get into it on this video, but if you right-click on your slicers, you will find slicer settings. These things I would tell you are very important to understand. I won't get into it, but if it does help keep them in place. Part of learning about this is to start with the basic stuff. Make a simple dashboard, change the colors, layouts, get comfortable with it. If you notice that things are kind of bouncing around your screens, yes, there's ways to lock it down, and there's other training clips on that. So it's kind of like a progressive training. So that covered pretty much all the themes, going from that raw data table, which is the absolutely most important thing to get. Create the table, that's just a click. Create the pivot table, that's like 10 seconds. Select the slicers. Well, if you kind of have an idea in mind, that's like just a matter of picking off that selection list. Arranging them takes a bit of time because you do want to think a little bit about, where things are. Configuring them, changing the colors and, do you want 2 or 3 columns or 1? Do you want them more horizontal or vertical? And which one should be on the left? Which one's on the right? Colors, etc. That can take a fair bit of time. If it's for your own personal use, well, you can decide how much time you're worth. If it's for people to share with, then you might want to put a little bit more effort into making sure it's a little bit more polished. The beauty of these, though, if you're sharing them in Excel, is that if people don't like your slicers, or, for example, you didn't put in phone numbers, if phone numbers is in the database, in your Excel database, then someone can just add it on. Just go there, insert slicer, phone number, find the phone number, and then turn off the slicer or create another one. It doesn't matter. That's so quick and easy. So that's a lot to cover in 13 minutes, and it seems like a long video to me, but on the other hand, trying to cover everything you want to know about how to use slicers and dashboards in Excel is certainly more than 15 minutes worth of effort, but I hope that covered the basics. And a lot of these things, as you find, there's all sorts of reference material on each one of these topics. Pivot tables, there's got to be encyclopedias out there of that. And certainly working with dashboards. And we didn't talk about using enterprise versions or sharing them via SharePoint. This was all about desktops only. So we created this one, but I don't think it would be that hard to take it to that original one if you really wanted to. Because all I did on this one was, as you can see, I've got the same data set. I created the pivot table here, added the slicers in, changed the colors, shapes, moved them around. Again, they're all free-floating, certainly during construction. And there you go. I think I actually put some thought into these colors. Oh, I guess these are all like addresses over here, kind of phone and email kind of makes sense. And again, that's just customer convenience. Make your choices. As I say, the timeline slicers are a bit different because they only work in 2013, and I haven't even connected them. Nope. So something to look forward to in 2013, because timelines would be a great thing to have in a slicer. And the best advice I can give for people doing this stuff is if you've got Excel 2010 and you basically play with pip or just charts and spreadsheets already, you don't have to be super advanced to do this. Just get a table and give it a try. Try to create a few dashboards. You'll find they're actually amazingly easy. And once you get comfortable with them, then kind of move forward into the more advanced features. Really, in terms of Excel BI, this is maybe 5% of what it can do now. So get comfortable with this, and then you'll be able to do a lot more of those advanced options.